April 18, 1943, off the jagged coastline of Cape Bon, Tunisia, where the Mediterranean whispers secrets to the North African shore. The sun hangs low, a molten orb bleeding orange into the horizon, casting long shadows across the turquoise waves. That slap against sun-baked cliffs? The air hums with the low thrum of piston engines, a mechanical heartbeat echoing over the salt spray. In the cockpits of sleek, shark-mouthed shadows slicing through the sky, young men grip yokes slick with sweat, their eyes scanning the vast blue expanse below. Transports lumber like weary beasts, their trimotor forms heavy with the weight of desperation, crates of ammunition, fuel drums, tinned rations for a desert army clinging to survival. Escorts weave protective patterns above. Messerschmitts with their wasp-waisted grace, convinced of their supremacy in this theater of endless sand and sky. But in the distance, a murmur grows into a roar, the unmistakable snarl of Allison engines pushing Pratt & Whitney fury. The sea below churns white in the prop wash, and the world narrows to the glint of gun ports, the acrid tang of cordite yet to bloom, and the fleeting certainty that today the hunters become the hunted. If you find these echoes of history stirring your soul, please subscribe to WW2 Tales and hit the bell icon, so that the stories of valor and sacrifice never fade from your feed. In the vast tapestry of the Second World War, few threads gleam with such improbable brilliance as this one. Woven in the crucible of North Africa where empires clashed not just for territory, but for the very rhythm of supply lines that sustained the fight. By early 1943, the Afrika Korps under Erwin Rommel teetered on the brink, its panzers mired in the mud of Kasserine Pass, its soldiers rationed to meager scraps amid the relentless Allied advance. Tunisia, that narrow boot of land thrusting into the sea, had become the last redoubt funnel through which the Luftwaffe funneled lifeblood to a starving force. Operation Flax, the Allied stratagem to choke this artery, had been brewing in the sun-scorched tents of the Northwest African Tactical Air Force. Intelligence whispers from ultra-decrypts painted the picture. Vast formations of Junkers Ju-52 transports, those workhorse trimotor haulers born of pre-war civilian skies, would skim the waves on their return from drop zones, laden, empty, but vulnerable, shepherded by a thin screen of Bf-109s and Mi-110 destroyers. The P-40 Warhawk, America's rugged hawk of the desert, stood at the vanguard. Evolved from the P-36 Hawk in a frantic redesign by Curtiss engineers in Buffalo, New York, the P-40 entered service in 1941 as a stopgap fighter-tough dive bomb. Capable, but burdened by an air-cooled Allison V1710 engine that gasped at high altitudes, yielding the initiative to the high-flying Eagles of the Luftwaffe. Armed initially with a modest nose-mounted pair of .50 caliber Brownings, flanked by lighter 30s in the wings. It was derided by German aces as undergunned, a blunt instrument unfit for the dueling finesse of their cannon-armed 19s Luftwaffe. After-action reports from earlier skirmishes over Libya echoed this scorn.
Oberleutnant
Hans-Joachim Morsea, the Star of Africa with 158 victories, dismissed the P-40 as a flying tractor, slow to turn and stingless in a scrap, its firepower likened to spitting pebbles at a panther. Yet in the low-level brawl of the desert, where altitude was a luxury and dive speed the equalizer, the Warhawk's 6.50 caliber machine guns upgraded in the P-40F Kitty Hawk variant, 2 belt-fed rivers of lead, proved a revelation. This mission mattered because it was no mere interception. It was the scalpel to Rommel's jugular, a blow that would bleed the Afrika Korps dry and accelerate the tumble of Axis fortunes across the Mediterranean theater. By severing the air bridge, the Allies transformed Tunisia from a lifeline into a tomb, paving the way for the surrender of 250,000 German and Italian troops just 2 months later. It's an event that rippled through Berlin's war rooms like a thunderclap. Forcing Hitler to confront the inexorable grind of attrition, the German crews that morning, veterans of the Eastern Front's frozen hells and the desert's scorching mirages, boarded their Ru-52s with the weary optimism of men who had danced with death before. They expected a milk run homeward, low over the waves to evade radar. The sea's shimmer, masking their silhouettes from prowling Spitfires high above. The escorts, those lithe Me-109FS with their Daimler-Benz PER, were to be untouchable sentinels. Their 20mm cannons and 13mm machine guns ready to swat any interlopers like flies. In the minds of these pilots hardened by Barbarossa's skies, where Yak fighters crumpled under precise bursts, the American P-40 was a punchline, a relic of Lend-Lease mediocrity shipped to unblooded colonials. They anticipated the Warhawk. As they had in prior raids, lumbering interveners, or pilots green in tactics wrote, easy pickings for a looping Shandel or a high-side pass. The transport's gunners, manning the dorsal and ventral turrets with MG-15s, joked and clipped Deutsch over the intercom about the Amerikaner Blechdos, the tin can Yank. Undergunned and overconfident, its thin skin punctured by a single grazing hit. Victory seemed scripted. Evade the flak nests on the coast, hug the azure curtain of water, and slip into Sicilian harbors before dusk, resupplied and unbroken. What they actually encountered shattered that illusion like glass under a hammer. Blow. As the formation of 120 Ju-52s droned southeastward, bellies empty but spirits buoyed by a successful drop over beleaguered Tunisian outposts, the horizon erupted. From the cliffs of Cap Bon, 46 P-40s of the 57th Fighter Groups, 82nd and 95th Squadrons, bolstered by the 324th Group's 316th Squadron and a Spitfire. Top cover from No. 1 South African Air Force plummeted earthward in a thundering dive. The sea boiled under their slipstream, geysers of foam marking their plunge from 10,000 feet to mast-top height in seconds. German radiomen crackled urgent warnings, Feinlich-Jäger, Amerikaner, Tiefleg, but it was too late. The P-40s, their shark-toothed noses grinning feral in the spray, sliced through the flock like wolves through sheep. What the Germans experienced was not the expected fragility, but a maelstrom of defiance. Warhawks banking tight in the salt-laced air, their pilotsmen like Captain John Genther of the 95th, with his steady hand on the trigger and leashing. Synchronized volleys that turned the sky into a lattice of tracer fire. Transports staggered, wings shearing in fiery blooms. Crews bailing into the churning Mediterranean where sharks circled the debris. Escorts twisted desperately, their superior climb rates meaningless in the deck-dancing melee, only to find the P-40's dive brakes deployed, stabilizing broadside runs that hammered home the truth. Mockery had blinded them to the Yankees' raw, unyielding ferocity. By mission's end, as the sun dipped toward the waves, the Germans tallied not triumph, catastrophe a chasm between arrogance and annihilation that left Luftwaffe planners reeling to grasp the enormity. One must delve into the ledgers of war, those cold chronicles etched in debriefing transcripts, and gun camera footage, where claims clash with confirmations like swords in the fog, the after-action reports from the 57th Fighter Group, filed under the dim bulbs of Yauch's Les Bines airfield that evening, painted a canvas of carnage, 74 Ru-52s sent spinning into the sea, their aluminum carcasses retrieved later by Italian salvage. Divers as grim testimony actual losses pegged at 60 by Luftwaffe records, but the intent unmistakable. 16 escort fighters felled as well. Me-109s and 110s plucked from the fray by the P-40's unerring aim. Their pilots like Lieutenant Karl Wolfgang Redlich of JG-27 splashing down amid oil-slicked swells, radioing frantic maydays that echoed unanswered into the ether. American losses? 6 Warhawks, gallant toll for a day's thunder, their pilots like Lieutenant Frank L. Hauck of the 82nd Squadron nursing perforated birds back to base on failing engines. Medals pinned later in quiet ceremonies. Actual anchors abound. The Ru-52's vulnerability laid bare in technical specs cruising at a mere 165 miles per hour. Its plywood skin fuselage splintering under .50 caliber. Impacts that chewed through struts like termites through oak. Declassified RAF intelligence from the time corroborates the route. With one captured German airman, Unteroffizier Heinz Bauer, recounting an interrogation at Algiers, we flew as if on rails, low and slow, believing the sea our shield. Then the Americans came, their guns barking without cease a storm of hornets we could not outrun. Quantitative data underscores the shift. Prior to April 18th, Luftwaffe resupply flights averaged 80% success rates. Post-flax that plummeted to 12%, with 150 transports lost across the operations span. Gun camera reels, grainy reels developed in hasty darkrooms, captured the poetry and precision. AP-40 synchronized sextet of Brownings, stitching a 1-9's cowling. The enemy fighter erupting in a secondary blaze as fuel lines ruptured. These are not mere numbers, but the vertebrae of history each claim, vetted by the meticulous tallies of the 12th Air Force's Statistics Branch, where Lieutenant Colonel Addison Baker, commanding the 57th, logged the day's harvest with the gravity of a banker balancing ledgers. Yet woven through these facts lingers the human pulse, the tremor in a P-40 pilot's voice during debrief, recounting the splash of a Ru-52 just yards off the wingtip, or the silent prayer of a downed German gunner adrift on a yellow dinghy, watching his comrades' pyres light the twilight sea in the forge of that day's fury. Perceptions molten and reshaping, the P-40 emerged not as the mocked underdog, but as harbinger of a doctrinal sea change that rippled through the Axis high command. Prior to Tunisia's skies, German aces like Marseille and his ilk viewed American fighters through the prism of superiority complex Bf-19s, a scalpel to the Warhawks Club. Their energy tactics dictating dogfights from the rarefied heights where the Alicent choked. The P-40's reputation, burnished in the Flying Tigers' Burmese brawls, but tarnished in North Africa's early dust-ups, was one of stoic endurance rather than aerial artistry. Tough against ground fire, yes, but outclassed in the turn and burn. Ballet, its armament derided in captured Luftwaffe diaries as a pea-shooter parade. Marseille himself, in a letter to his brother, penned amid Tobruk's ruins, quipped of downing a P-40. It fights like a cornered badger, fierce but foreseeable. Its guns whispering where mine roar. This event inverted that narrative with seismic force, the massed ambush, orchestrated by Brigadier General Hugh Grant MacDonald of the 12th Air Force, showcased the Warhawks' true métier, not lofty jousts, but predatory swoops, leveraging dive momentum. In the unyielding cadence of its .50 caliber symphony, post-mission analyses in Berlin's Reichsloffahrtrientisti shifted tone abruptly. Luftwaffe Chief of Staff Hans Jaschanek, in a terse memo dated April 25th, urged reassessment of Yankee low-level interdiction capabilities, acknowledging the P-40's role in eroding convoy viability. Ideologically, it gnawed at the Nazi mythos of Aryan invincibility. Here was the democratic arsenal, born of Detroit's assembly lines rather than Durr's precision, proving that quantity of fire those belt-fed Brownings chewing through 400 rounds per minute could humble the qualitative edge. For the pilots on both sides, the transformation was visceral. American airmen, once shadowed by self-doubt after Kasserine's humiliations, strode from their dispersals with heads high. The P-40's canvas dust covers now talismans of vindication. Germans fished from the drink by E-boats under moonless nights, carried back not just wounds, but whispers of doubt. If this undergun beast could reap such a harvest, what horrors awaited from the factories churning out Mustangs and Lightnings? The event recalibrated the aerial war's calculus, compelling the Luftwaffe to husband resources, diverting fighters from the Eastern Front and hastening the cascade that would see the Afrika Korps fold in May. In the quiet aftermath, as P-40S taxied on scarred runways, oil smoke curling like incense. The ideology of total war bent toward a humbler truth. No machine stands alone, but in the hands of resolute men. Even the dismissed becomes the destroyer. Throughout the chaos, one element recurs. A relentless percussion underscoring the drama, the staccato thunder of the .50 caliber Browning machine gun. That belt-fed behemoth emblematic of American abundance. Cinched in batteries of 6 beneath the Warhawks' cowling. These weapons spat not mere bullets, but a deluge. 2,700 rounds per gun in mission loads. Dot fed from canvas belts groaning with brass-jacketed plenty. each impact a testament to the Fordist miracle of wartime production. In the dive on that fateful formation, as Captain Genther's P-40 bore down on a straggling Ru-52, the Brownings awoke with a guttural chatter, tracers arcing like fireflies in the dusk, shredding the transport's starboard engine in a blossom of flame and oil. The sound, that unmistakable brap-brap muffled by slipstream, yet resonant in every cockpit, carried across the waves. A democratic drumbeat drowning the Me-109's sharper cracks. For the German crews, it was the auditory harbinger of doom, the endless chatter mocking their sparse 7.92mm loads, finite and frantic. Later in the 95th Squadron's revetments, ground crewmen reloaded those belts under floodlights, the metallic clink of links a ritual of replenishment, symbolizing not just firepower, but the inexhaustible wellspring of a free society arsenal's humming in distant heartlands, where liberty's laborers forged chains unbreakable by tyranny's design. Again and again, in the swirl of turns and climbs, the 50's roar defined the fray. Lieutenant Houck, wingman hit, but holding, raking a 110 destroyer with a sustained burst that sawed through its twin booms. The guns recoil, shuddering the airframe. Like a heartbeat amplified, this weapon born of John Browning's genius in the Great War's shadow. It's embodied democracy's creed abundance, not for conquest's sake, but for preservation. Each round a vote cast in lead for the open. Skies where eagles, not iron crosses, would prevail. In the emotional troughs between volleys, when adrenaline ebbed and the sea's vastness pressed in, pilots clung to that sound. An auditory anchor amid the vertigo, reminding them that behind every hammerfall lay the collective might of a nation unbound, as the last echoes fade over Cape Bon's cliffs, where wild time still scents the wind and the Mediterranean laps at forgotten wrecks. We reflect on a truth etched in contrails and wreckage, that in the grand ledger of freedom, the undergunned becomes the unyielding when fueled by the quiet. Abundance of a people who choose not subjugation, but the shared feast of possibility. The P-40, that desert wanderer scorned and then silenced by its own thunder, whispers across decades that ideologies crumble not to superior steel alone, but to the democratic deluge the endless belts of resolve, the guns that speak for gardens. Tilled in peace, reminding tyrants that abundance is the ultimate arsenal, and liberty its eternal trigger. In those April skies, as transports sank like humbled titans and aces tasted salt defeat, the world glimpsed the larger arc, from mockery to mastery.
Oh.
The free world's hornets swarmed not in vengeance but vindication, ensuring that dawn would break on fields where plenty, not privation, sows the seeds of tomorrow.